Okay. Board members, I think we're going to get started. Good morning, everybody. I would like to call this virtual board meeting workshop to order this morning. This workshop is pertaining to the Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage Project.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure was clear, because that's in the Fresno area, in the Madera area.
Everybody phones unless you're the speaker.
He does.
We're getting a lot of feedback.
He's really up and down depending on the day. And I kind of figured that's what was going on, but I just wanted to.
Gary, could you mute your?
Okay, Ryan, are we ready?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this virtual board meeting workshop together. The workshop this morning is going to be on the Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District property management leases and competitive bid process. For the record, my name is Bill Edgar. I'm the president of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everyone for logging in or phoning in today. We appreciate your taking the time out of your very busy schedules to be with us this morning. This teleconference constitutes the board's workshop meeting for the month of July 2020. First of all, this morning, I would like to extend a special welcome to our newest member, Mary Jane Griego, who has just been appointed to fill the existing vacant position on the board. And we're very pleased to have her aboard for the to make a full board. She's not been able to complete all her paperwork and take her oath of office yet. So she's but she's sitting in as a citizen, I guess, this morning. But we're very pleased to have her be with us. She's going to be attending this morning, will take place as a voting member for the July 24th regular board meeting. I've known Mary Jane for many years. We've worked collaboratively on many issues, including flood risk reduction for the Plumas Lake area in my first iteration on the board back in the early 2001, I guess 2001 to 2005. And the successful efforts that we had with the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, which were patterned after the successful efforts that she led or was part of in Yuba County through the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority in Yuba County. Mary Jane recently has been with Congressman Garamendi's office as the senior district representative in Yuba County area, and has served as on the board of directors as a member of the Olivehurst Public Utility District since 2017. She's a working owner of Duke's Diner since 2012, and as I said before, she was a member of the Yuba County Board of Supervisors from 2001 to 2017, where I had the pleasure of working with her for a number of years. I've asked Mary Jane to just introduce herself today and say a few words to the attending public if she doesn't mind. Mary Jane, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm looking forward to serving with you on this board. As Bill stated, I have a lot of experience. I actually went through the flood of 86 and 97 here in Yuba County, and that's what inspired me to run for the Board of Supervisors. I thought they could use some help. So through that effort, Three Rivers was created, and the success that they've had as an agency as it relates to flood control has been phenomenal for the South Yuba County area. We feel very safe behind these levees. Of course, you can never take that for granted, and maintenance is a big part of it. But I look forward to working with all of you, and I get to sit in a little bit today. The county is actually closing down dine-in, and our family business has been around for 58 years in the South County, And so I have to prepare for the takeout only. So I have a lot to do today, but thank you very much for the warm introduction.
Well, thank you, Mary Jane. We welcome you aboard and thank you for taking your time out of what looks like to be a busy schedule for you at the diner. I'm sorry that it's affecting you so directly, but at least we'll have somebody on the board that can really talk from real experience about this pandemic. That's how it affects small businesses, which is really a concern of everybody at this point. But anyway, welcome aboard. We're really pleased. I'm particularly very pleased to have you,
Thank you.
Be a member of this board. Thank you, Mary Jane.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make any comments or welcoming comments at this point?
Well, I'll say that I've worked with Mary Jane many years, and my introduction up there also was the 1986 flood when I helicoptered in at 1 o'clock in the morning to close that levee break there. So it'll be good working with you, Mary Jane.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Hey, Mary Jane, Mike Valines, great to have you on board. I look forward to working with you. And Bill never said that he was particularly happy to have me on the board. So I'm looking forward to seeing what magic I need to apply.
Thank you very much. Good to be on board. Thank you.
Michael's always good for a laugh these days. Thank you, Michael. Anyway, good to have you aboard. And for those, we'll proceed with the agenda at this point. For those of you who read the agenda already, you'll notice that the staff has put together a rather extensive list of instructions, which at first glance seem to be intimidating. However, the words really simply tell you how to do three things: how to join the meeting, how to participate in the meeting, and how to get the staff and consultant reports and material or information that you may need while we're discussing these matters. And first, you can join the meeting either visually on your computer or by phone by accessing the link which is showing on the board's website under the date for today's meeting, or you can simply phone in by dialing the number listed on the instructions and using the password, which is also shown there. Second, you can best participate by emailing or texting our board clerk, Ryan Jones, at his email, which is listed on the instruction sheet. Your email can be sent before the meeting or during the meeting before the item comes up. Leslie, Ryan, and other staff will keep track of those emails and texts and referring to people to me for introduction. And we're going to proceed on a first sent, first heard basis. For those on the phone, there will be an opportunity to comment, and we will be watching for those who want to speak. And finally, for those who want electronic copies of the materials being reviewed by the board, please email our clerk, and he will email them to you right away. Now, the ground rules are, first, I believe Ryan will, has everyone except the board members on mute right now. In the public comments section, he will unmute you, and I believe that you will also have to unmute yourself before you speak. Second, as the board members want to speak, please raise your hand on the video or text Leslie or Ryan, and who will in turn inform me, and I'll take the next two members in line, and I'll call on the first and then the second to speak, and we will repeat this process until all the board members want to speak and have spoken. So we'll always have a speaker and someone on deck as we proceed. Third, we want to get to, when we get to public comment, Ryan will unmute the public and other interested parties, and I'll ask for public comment. Leslie and Ryan, as well as other staff, will try to identify two people from the public who've requested to speak. I'll then call upon those individuals, and we'll repeat the process until there's no more people who want to speak. Now, I'd just like to urge everyone to try to be a little patient and courteous and kind and understanding. This is a very stressful and frustrating and exhausting time in our general lives, and certainly these kinds of meetings are not as fulfilling or productive, obviously, as the face-to-face meetings. But and I'm sure there are going to be some glitches today as we proceed. We've been doing this for a couple of months now, but there's always a glitch or two that occurs during these meetings. So let's try to be professional and courteous. We're all under a lot of stress and pressure these days. Okay, Leslie and Ryan, do either of you or other participating staff want to add, modify, or clarify anything I've said?
No, Mr. President.
Okay. So members, we're still under item 1. We've completed the welcome section. Leslie, do you have any introductions or announcements that you want to make at this time?
No general announcements other than to assure everyone that we're trying to onboard our new board member as soon as possible. So we're trying to set up those meetings and get her all up to speed and ready to participate.
That'd be great. Thank you, Leslie. Okay, members, we're on item 2, the roll call. And Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, please call the roll to determine for the record whether we have a quorum to conduct our business, please.
Board Member Johnson.
Here.
Board Member Ramirez. Board Member Ramirez.
Here.
Board Member Valines.
Here?
Board Member Countryman.
Here.
Vice President Dolan.
I'm here until 11 a.m.
President Edgar.
I'm here. Thank you, Ryan. We have a full board members today. Members, we're on item 3, public comments not on the agenda. If anybody has any comments not on the agenda regarding items that aren't published, please send an email to Ryan or raise your hand and we'll try to get to you. Ryan or Leslie, do you see anybody that wants to speak to the board on items that are not on the agenda?
I don't have anything on my list, Mr. President.
How about you, Ryan?
I don't see anything either.
Okay, thank you. Members, we'll go on to item 4, which is our main item for today's discussion, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Drainage District. And today we're going to talk about the property management leases and the competitive bid process. In a minute, I'm going to turn this meeting over to Andrea Buckley, who is the board's branch chief for environmental services and land management, who will provide us an overview of the agenda and the purpose and the objectives of the workshop. And after Andrea finishes, Casey Kimball, and who's the supervising right-of-way agent for DWR's real estate branch, and Ali Lopez, who's a senior right-of-way agent for DWR's real estate branch, will assist Andrea with the presentation. So Andrea, I'm going to turn this meeting over to you and let you proceed, please.
Oops.
I am the chief of the Environmental Services and Land Management Branch, and I'm going to take the board through the process for the competitive bid process. As we move forward, we plan on bringing some leases before the board, and there's a very specific process laid out pursuant to water code that we would like to familiarize the board with. So here we are. It's going to be a 3-part presentation. I'm going to start, then our supervising right-of-way agent, Casey Kimball, is going to present a section of slides, as well as Ali Lopez is going to, she's our senior right-of-way agent working on behalf of the board, who is going to present the process as it's laid out in the water code. Ryan, next slide, please. So here's the three-part presentation: the introduction of our property management team, and an intro into the Sacramento and San Joaquin Drainage District and its relationship to the board. And then I'm going to discuss the board and real estate branch of DWR's relationship and responsibilities related to project management. Casey Kimball is going to give a lease overview of what a lease is and why we lease, as well as the board's leasing activities as they are now and what we perceive into the future. And then Ali Lopez is going to go through the mandates, codes, and processes related to a successful solicitation of a lease and provide a public bid example for the board to follow along with. Ryan, next slide, please. So here is the board's organizational chart, and as you can see, the two highlights on the right in yellow is where the property management lies in the Environmental Services and Land Management branch. I am the branch chief, and then we have a dedicated senior right-of-way agent, Diana Garofalo, who assists with property management. And next slide, please. On the DWR side, in the real estate branch, which is a branch of the Division of Engineering, the two highlights we have here are Casey Kimball, who is a supervising right-of-way agent and the chief of the property management and encroachment permit section. She provides services to the board as well as encroachment permits and property management as they relate to the state water project. And down below, you could see the highlight for Ali Lopez, who's the dedicated senior right-of-way agent, dedicated to the SSJDD and the board's property management down below. So that's our 4 team members here. Next slide, please. So the board's relationship to DWR as it relates to property management is outlined in the MOA executed in 2008. Section 11 calls out the property management and real estate functions that we receive support from DWR on. Highlighted in red is what we'll be discussing today, managing existing real estate holdings, including management of leases. Next slide, please. And more specifically, there's a specific MOA that was executed in 2015, which outlines more specifically the workflow responsibilities of the DWR and board team to take care of all the property management functions. And here they are listed out: maintaining our real estate records, appraisal of property, which is an important function of leasing property, as well as purchasing and divesting of property. Preparation of maps and exhibits to support enforcement, to support projects and programs. The negotiation, acquisition of property and preparing those necessary documents. Acquisition and acquiring necessary lands, easements, including the very important task of utility relocations on behalf of board projects, on behalf of projects that have been approved by the board. Next slide, please. We also have, there's also executing right-of-way permits onto our property, as well as licenses for more semi-permanent features. Something the board may be familiar with, we handled 7 last year, the preparation of resolutions of necessity where eminent domain is warranted. We did that on the Lower Elkhorn project last year, and that's a function that we get a lot of real estate support on. And what we're going to be discussing more in depth today is managing those existing real estate holdings, including the management of the leases, which is new leasing, renewing of leases, and termination of leases. Next slide, please. So the Sacramento and San Joaquin Drainage District property is the entity that holds the property. The Water Code Section 8502 provides the board that they will manage and control the lands held in the SSJDD. Currently, the SSJDD holds approximately 27,000 acres in fee title, approximately 10,000 acres in joint use agreements, and over 240,000 acres in easements. Next slide, please. Here's a more broken out chart by county alphabetically of where the property lies. As you can see, Yolo County and Sutter County, where we have our largest bypasses and flood control features, have the most amount of property held in fee and in easement as well, and with other various counties where we have flood responsibilities. I'll pause for a second for folks to review that. Thank you. All right, thanks. So to modernize and manage our records, in the last couple years, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Drainage District Parcel Viewer was developed. And this is a GIS product that allows the staff to access where our properties lie. All the property is laid out in fee, easement, outgrant, or in agreements, and it's all color coded on, so makes it easy for staff to determine what the rights are for our programs. Also, related documents are attached within. You can pull deeds, memorandum of settlements, and policy of title insurance are linked in to that program. Next slide, please. And more specifically, this product is now available for our partners and, I should say, just members of our public who have interest in where the SSJDD property lies. And it can be easily accessible on the ArcGIS website with the login SSJDD_P for parcels, and the login is geodetic445. I would like to provide the disclaimer that there are some features that are not accessible to the public. Some of the easement language is not available, and some of the documents are not available because they require subject matter experts to review. We don't want folks to use this information to construct a project, since a lot of the data in here is not survey grade. Some of it is just line work, and so we do like to provide that disclaimer. If you need an initial idea of whether or not the property exists in SSJDD, it's a great tool for that. So here's the access, and if anyone has any questions related to that access or using that, feel free to contact me, Andrea Buckley, and we can assist in helping members of the public or partners access that data. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Supervising Right-of-Way Agent Casey Kimball, who assists the property management section of the board in our renewing and solicitation of leases. Casey?
Good morning, President Edgar and board members. As Andrea said, my name is Casey Kimball, and I'm the section chief for the property management and crush permit section in the real estate branch. So I'm going to go over some general leasing terms, general leasing ideas, and then go into the specifics of the board leases themselves. So what is a lease? A lease is a contractual obligation outlining the terms in which a lessee or tenant agrees to pay the lessor for their property for a specified time. It's an interest in the property, and the board leases are not recorded and they're not transferable, so they cannot be assigned or subleased. So why would we lease? Well, first of all, we can only lease property that we own in fee. So as Andrea indicated, there's some 240,000 acres which the board owns easements to. We cannot lease those properties. But the properties that are owned in fee, we must then evaluate if the lease use is in conflict with the property's intended use. So there are thousands of acres of fee-owned SSJDD property, but the majority of those are the actual levee prism. So a lease in general is not really compatible with the operations and maintenance of flood control. For example, you don't want to have a lease for agriculture on the levee. So we're looking for more like big chunks of parcels, potentially and bypasses that aren't that don't have a flood control levy on it to lease. So why would we lease? To minimize the costly property maintenance. For example, if you don't have a lease, you have to maintain the vegetation through, for example, mowing, which takes resources. It takes permitting. You have to get permits to maintain state property, and that all takes time and a cost to that. Instead, you could lease the property to a tenant for cattle grazing, and the tenant would be responsible to maintain the property. Another benefit of leasing is having a presence on the property. As we unfortunately know, vacant state property, especially in rural areas, which the board has a lot of, can attract unwanted activities, unwanted people. So if you have the property leased, then you have the tenant on the property, and it would not be as vacant looking. And the tenant would be kind of the eyes and ears for the board. And they could help deter those unwanted activities, which are a big problem later. So another benefit of leasing is that it generates revenue. All of our leases are fair market value. So that's either determined by an appraisal, if that's a sole source lease, or it goes out to public bid to determine the value. Next slide, please. So the board active leases. So the board does have a variety of leases, including 27 public leases with CVFPB. There's 7 what we call traditional leases, what we know for grazing and agriculture use. We have 1 sand and gravel mining lease, 1 parking lot lease, 10 oil and gas extraction leases, and then we also manage 2 apiary licenses. Next slide, please. So on behalf of the board, DWR collects the lease and royalty revenues and deposits those into the general fund as required by the current statutes. Generally, the leases have generated approximately $800,000 per year over the past 8 years. So the leases usually have, at least the traditional leases, usually have an annual rent that's collected, and it's usually the same rent for the first 5-year term of the lease. However, you can see that the lease and the royalty revenue does fluctuate. Royalties are based on how much, for example, oil and gas is pulled, and also the mining lease is based on quantities as well. So those rates do fluctuate from year to year. Next slide, please. Okay, so upcoming leasing activity. So,
hey, Casey.
Yes.
Casey, this is Bill Edgar. I just wanted to ask a question on the previous slide in terms of the budgeting. I noticed yesterday we're looking at the budget and the budget for this year, or actually for the year that's being finalized at this point, that's 2019-20, has about half this amount in it. Half of is about 300,000. Are those revenues, do they come in late in the year, or why is that showing up about 300,000 or so on so far?
Well, we usually do when we have the revenue that's based on like the sand and gravel, it's based on quantities. So that comes in after. We have to find out how much material they moved, and then they pay per material. And the same with the royalties. So those usually do come in after. The traditional leases do pay upfront for the year, but you can see that it does fluctuate from year to year depending on the quantities that are removed for the sand and gravel or the royalties.
Yeah, how much those leases, how much later in the, for 2019-20, are we going to be expecting those revenues in by the end of the year or calendar year, or what? How long does it take to get those numbers in?
I believe so. I believe it depends on when the term of the lease started.
Oh, I
So for
see.
example, if it started in September and it ends in September for the first year, then that's when the rent, so to speak, would be due is the end of September. So it's by each particular lease.
Yeah. Now, one other question, and I'll let you go here, but you indicated that we have a large amount of property owned in fee, but you're looking for large chunks without a levy on it to lease out. What percentage or ballpark percentage would you say of, I think you said 20,000 acres altogether, but of that 20,000, how much is really leasable?
That's a really hard number to quantify because there are other factors that are involved. I would, if I had to guess, I would say more than 60-70% are touching a levy or just some part of a levy. I think it's more just the bypasses that are large chunks, and then there are some other random large chunks here and there. But we do have to figure out what was the original intent of why we bought these large chunks, and was it for mitigation, for example? Because then we can't exactly be leasing out for a use that's in conflict with the mitigation. So it's deceiving to say the acreage that's owned in fee, because that's not really the number of acres that we could actually lease out.
Yeah. Okay. That's important, I think, because if you look at the gross number, 20,000, part of it's owned in fee, part of it's not. Part of it has a levy on it, so you can't lease it out. Part of it's too small. So you're really talking about a small percentage of the total amount that's really available for leasing. Is that right? About 30% is what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, even less than that, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so some of our upcoming leasing activity. So we have some of our traditional leases are in holdover. That means the initial term has expired and they're in month-to-month status. So our first goal is to get those into compliance, get those into active leases. Those tenants are still on the property, they're still paying rent month to month, but we want to get them into a lease term that's active. And the two ways we can do that is through a public bid of the leases, which we'll get into a lot more detail, and then executing a new lease term with the existing tenant if we get a public bid exemption. And I'll get into that in a minute too. Other upcoming lease activities, managing the existing terms and payments for our active leases. We have created a spreadsheet tracker to manage what leases we have, and it helps us prioritize which leases we do want to go out to bid on. It also keeps track of the rent and everything like that, the details. And then finding new leasing opportunities. As we kind of just talked about, trying to find if there's any other property that the board might have available that has not been leased that could be leased. Primarily bypasses are kind of our first shot out there. Now, next slide, please. Okay, so the Department of General Services, DGS, is our oversight agency, and they're the ones that create the rules of leasing state property. Their mandate is that all state property leases need to go out to a competitive bid. They want everyone in the public to be able to have an opportunity to lease state property, to have a fair opportunity. However, they do have some exemptions to this rule. So next slide, please. So these are the 5 exemptions to competitive bid of leases. Number 1 is where prior approval has been received from DGS to lease without solicitation at a rental rate of a fair market value. For example, a property might be landlocked except for the adjacent property owner has access. In that case, we could potentially sole source lease with the adjacent property owner because they're the only other person that would have accessibility to this property. Nobody else in the public would be able to. So in that case, we go to DGS, We present our case of why we think this needs to be exempt from public bid and why we should sole source with this individual, and then they can give us our approval. And in that case, we would get an appraisal of the fair market value rental rate. The second bid exemption is renewal of a lease of 3 5-year extensions when we have received the prior approval, as in example 1. So in that first example, we get their approval to lease for 5 years with individual next door, and then option 2 allows us to then renew that lease and not have to go out to bid again. Bid exemption number 3 is to nonprofit organizations. If we want to sole source directly with the nonprofit, we do not have to go out to public bid to lease. Number 4 are leases to other governmental agencies. So as I mentioned earlier, the board has 27 leases with CVFPB. Those do not have to go out to public bid. And the final bid exemption is telecommunication leases. For some reason, DGS does not require telecommunication leases to go out to bid. And next slide, please. So lease renewals and exercising lease options. So lease renewal is a term that we kind of used prior to DGS's bid exemption mandate change. Historically, if we had a good tenant and the lease term was over and the tenant still wanted to lease and the board still wanted to lease, we would just enter into a new lease with them. But now that's considered sole sourcing if it does not get DGS's exemptions of one of the 5 listed in the previous slide. So those are considered new leases. If anybody else in the public has the opportunity to lease that property, it does have to go out to public bid. If there is an existing lease with a tenant where they have an option, so generally our leases are 5-year terms, and then we have options to extend. You could do another 5 years or another 2 5-year options. Those are considered part of the existing lease. So it's a continuation of the lease, and those do not have to go out to bid. And so we do have a few of those as well. And then every time we do exercise one of those options, we do get an updated rental value appraisal. So we have the most accurate fair market value rental rate. Next slide. Okay, so I'll pause here. I'll see if we have any questions, and then I'm going to shoot it over to Allie to go into details about the public bidding process, including the water code and our procedure. Are there any questions at this time?
Thank you, Casey.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie or Ryan, do you see anybody that wants on the board that wants to talk about or ask a question?
I don't have anything from board members, Mr. President.
I don't see anything from the public.
Okay, I guess not, Casey. Let's proceed with Allie's presentation, please.
Okay. Good morning, President Edgar, board members, and attendees. My name is Allie Lopez, and I'll be going over the code sections that the code sections present like a roadmap of the process and procedures, how to bring a lease for public bidding. And we have highlighted the red in red activities that are specific to the board, and the black are to the board staff and RAB. So the first section, 8663, it's for the board ordering the lease of a property pursuant to the next proceeding section shall be in a regular open meeting and adopt a resolution declaring their intention to lease. 8664 goes into what is needed in the resolution that I will go in more detail in the bid package advertisement that we will present to the board. The 86 tells where the meeting shall be held. Section 8663 tells gives the information and the time framing of how much the adoption the resolution needs to be presented. Next slide, please. 8667 calls for a place and fixed time resolution shall be met, and talks about the sealed proposals, how they are received. And also it calls into what is a responsible bidder. And the board staff and RIB will have established a qualification requiring to bid out the bidders as responsible. 8668, upon call of an or bid at a session, any person may offer to lease the property upon the terms and conditions specified in the resolution for the rental and royalty exceeding 5% of the highest written proposal. So this during oral bidding, the actual vetted bidders will have an opportunity to make oral bids that exceed 5% of the highest bid. Only bidders established as responsible as defined in the above section will have their sealed bid form submitted and can present oral bids. Next slide, please. On 8669, the highest and only of all the oral bills will be made by a responsible person shall be finally accepted. The board make the final selection either at the session or an adjourned session meeting held 10 days next following 10 days. The board may also at the session, if it deems the action to be for the best public interest, reject any and all bids either in written or oral and withdraw the property from lease. So the board here has the opportunity to withdraw the lease if it's determined to be in the best public interest. Next section. So here I'll go over the process and roles for the board members and for the board staff. Again, red indicates board meeting specific activities. So first, we'll go over the pre-bid activities, and this is by the board staff and RIB. The section will be pre-bid activities by the board. There will be actual bid activities by the board staff and bid activities by the board members. And there will be some post activities as well. So we'll go over them in details in the next slides. A pre-activity for the board and board staff. So these are the activities that the board staff will take before having this submitted to a public bidding. We'll perform a site inspection to identify directions, access, locks, gates, and fencing information about the property. We'll seek DGS exemptions to public bid if it's applicable. We'll obtain the appropriate environmental documentation, geodetic requests. So this is the process before we determine if a lease will go out to public bid. And we'll also prepare the bid package and details. Next slide, please. So this activity is for the board for the pre-bid activities. The board must adopt a resolution declaring their intentions to lease their property. The resolution must include the following: the draft lease document and exhibit, the bid package, including the bid requirements and procedures, and a bid form. So I'll present an example of a bid form. Brian, if you can please bring that up.
One moment.
Thank you. So this is the bid evaluation. And when we receive the bid submittal, we'll have the bid name. And this is where the board staff and RIB will do the pre-vetting information before to determine which bidders can actually present their bids before the board. We'll make sure it will be the checklist and make sure that they have completed all the mandatory requirements, which include attendance of a pre-site inspection, and make sure they had submitted the 4 original bid package by the due time and date, and they have submitted the documentation specified in the bid requirement, and we have advertised for bidding. And these can change depending on the needs and specifics of the property. And we would weigh these requirements based on the most beneficial to the property and to the SSJDD benefits. So we will have a point system here, and then depending on what they submitted, we would award the points. So for instance, and when we're reviewing the bid package and evaluating, if we want to make sure that they have evidence of a minimum of 3 years of grazing experience, if this property needs more attendance and grazing and has unique things around it, we might require to have less or more depending on the needs of that property. If there's some environmental concerns that we want to make sure that the properties of the lessees, are have the experience, we might increase this. So we have summary of qualifications. We might weigh this more heavily because we want to make sure they are responsible bidders. And like I said, if they have the grazing plan, again, these are the things that we want to make sure that we are presenting responsible bidders for the board, for the property. If any questions on this before we move on? Okay, let's go back to the presentation, Ryan. Thank you. Okay, and the pre-activities again, date the board meeting, a CO bid openings and lease award approximately 2 months later after the advertisement has been made. Next slide, please. So the activities for the board staff and RIB is we were submit the advertised bid package into an online database called Fiscal, which is managed and set up by DGS. And this gives a range of accessibility to many properties that they're interested, properties that leasers might be interested in leasing property for the state or for SSGDD in this particular matter. And then we also have a direct mailing list that will submit the bid package, and these list has been created from past tenants and also people who have reached out to the board staff or to REB requesting interest in leasing property. So we update that list and we provide information about this particular property that will be available for leasing. We will set up a site inspection with the potential bidders, and this is mandatory that they must attend. The interested tenants address bidders' questions in writing from the site visits and thereafter. Establish a bid deadline approximately 1 month from the advertisement. And then this is when we also going to require the potential tenants to submit 2 sealed envelopes of their interest, and they have one envelope has to have envelope number 1 will have the pre-bid requirements and documentations, which confirm with all the terms and conditions we specified in the resolution, and to be opened by this envelope will be opened by REB and board staff to vet out the responsible bidders. And then envelope number 2 is the board member action, and they would open the bid offer to be open and examined and declare it at the board meeting. You know, now in this situation, Bill, we envision that you would be, the bid envelopes will be delivered to you, and then you would open in this forum on camera and open each of the bids. So if we are to present a lease for bidding and we're still in this situation, and that's how we would envision that we would take this action in effect. Any questions on this?
Ally, the bids itself have to be opened in a public board meeting, is that right?
Yes, and they have to be sealed and opened in the public meeting. And that's envelope number 2. Envelope number 1 with the documentation and requirements will be opened by board staff and REB.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
Hi, Ali. We do have a question. I think this is referring to an earlier slide. George Wade Wiley asks, do we currently have grazing leases in areas near SPFC facilities?
Could you
I could answer that if.
Okay.
Okay. We do have one grazing lease in the lower San Joaquin levee district. And then we used to have a grazing lease in the Colusa bypass. For some reason that one ended, but that one is on our radar to potentially look to see if we can do another grazing lease for. But those are the only 2 right now.
Next slide. Oh, you're welcome, George. Public bid process for REB and board staff. We'll schedule an item for the board agenda and prepare the proposed board resolution and staff report. The internal bid review of the seal bid qualification envelope. This is seal envelope number 1, as I indicated in the previous slide, to determine the responsible and qualified bidders. Make sure they adhere to the requirements, in other words, attended the site visit and submitted the required bid documentations. And I'll see the scoring example. Oh, I just noticed the scoring example was the one I just presented open earlier. So if you can open that, and then I'll go back to the other bid form. Ryan.
Okay, will do.
Okay. Okay, so this is a bid form. This should have been the first form. I should have gone over. I apologize for not noticing this. So this is the form that would go in envelope number 2. That will be open in a public meeting by President Edgar, or by you in this setting. So I've highlighted. So we will have the vetted potential bidder, which is here, their name, and then we would have their bid amount here, and then this is the information that you would read off in the public meeting. So-and-so has, bid this amount. So, and you would only receive the vetted responsible bidders determined by the board staff in REB. And then, any questions on this form?
I don't see any questions, Ali.
Okay. So if we can bring back, just to recap the other form, the evaluation. So this is the one that we had went previously. So here, this is the evaluation, bid evaluation that we will determine by the board staff and us to evaluate the qualifications. And again, this will be determined by the interest or the benefits of that particular property to be leased. Okay, if we can. Thank you, Ryan. If we can go back to the presentation.
Hey, Allie.
Yes.
This is Bill Edgar. On the form that is submitted showing the amount, is that the total amount for the lease for the say total 5-year period, or is that per year, or
It would be determined by the rental rent that we establish. If we establish by the 5-year term, or if we establish the annual rental rate, or if it's a royalty amount. So it depends on the lease, and we would have established that before. So
okay.
in the bid package that will go over, the advertised bid package, it would have that information.
Okay. So these are all they're the amounts that I have to read in public are all final amounts and will be comparable, right? We won't have to do any calculations or anything.
No, we would have established a base rental rate, and based on that, the bid will be presented. And then there's an opportunity for the oral bid that they must present a 5% highest from that original bid.
Okay. Thank you.
So G, we would notify bidders of the qualifications and the date of the board meeting so they can open their, submit their bids. Next slide, please. Thank you. Sealed envelopes number 2 for those qualified bidders will be provided to the board. So the board staff will provide this to you. If we're in the same setting, we'll have these delivered to you, or they'll be available if you're in the office to be picked up. So we can arrange those particulars at the President Everett's preference. Okay, B, during the public meeting, the board will open each sealed envelope, this envelope number 2, and read the bidder's name and bid amount on the bid form. The board will announce the highest bidder from the open bid envelopes. The board will call for an oral bid. Only qualified bidders whose bid envelopes were open in the session will be allowed to offer oral bids. Upon call of qualified bidders, may offer an oral bid of at least 5% above the highest of the bid from the sealed envelope. Any questions on that? Yes. Go ahead, member.
If there's only one bidder, what's the procedure for that?
The board has.
Do we compare it to our estimate or our valuation and then make a decision if we want to give the lease or not?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Oral bidding will continue until no further oral bids are presented. The highest of the oral bids for qualified bidders will be accepted by the board in the current meeting or adjourned session within 10 days. An authorization to RB to execute the lease. A second highest bid will be also selected. In case the first highest bidder does not carry through the entering into a lease. Also, in the resolution, the board will direct RB to enter into a lease with the second highest bidder in case the first highest bidder is not successful. At any time in the meeting, the board may reject any and all bids in favor of a public interest and withdraw the property from lease. Any questions on this one? On this slide, especially G? Okay.
I was on mute. No.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So post-bidding activities, the notification to successful bidders will be done by the staff and request the first year's rent certificate and insurance. negotiate the terms of the lease, and will also provide notification to unsuccessful bidders and return of the bid deposit. RB to execute the lease and will update the internal management tools and resources, lease trackers, notification to accounting for the new billing information and GIS information. Next slide, please. Okay, now here we're going to go over the example of the bid advertisement package. So this package is the advertisement that will be submitted in Fiscal and be mailed out to prospective interested leasees or tenants. And it will tell them the requirements of this particular lease, the minimum rental deposit, and the bid amount. So we can go to the top of page 1. So this is an example for a grazing ground that would be available for lease. It would have the information of the property and the size, the terms, and the it would have the exhibit, an aerial map of the area. So here, premises has, information, the county AP assessor parcel numbers, the type of use. In this case, it's going to be grazing, improvements, perimeters, fencing, the areas, again, the size of the property to be leased. And here you see it has the minimum bid amount. And this is to, be determined per acre. And we also have a minimum deposit that we, depending on the rental rate, will be established. We'll provide the minimum deposit requirement and also the duration terms. Here we'll have 5 years of the information and what is required of, certificate of insurance. And if we want to have available for lease, renewer for lease, if we want to have established for 3 5-year terms. Next page, please. So here's the procedure for bidding. There will be a pre-bid site inspection. All bidders will indicate that all bidders must attend to the mandatory bid site, and this is required in order to be eligible to continue bidding for this property. It would have the time and date. We would have where they need to submit their bid proposals. There are 2 packages and 2 copies of them, and indicating it must be sealed. And we can either accept in person or it can be delivered here to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board address. And they must indicate mailroom if they're going to mail it, sealed, bid, do not open. We have some disclaimers here for the public to be aware of. Here, the package, here's the checklist and the information. The checklist that must be met in order to be eligible. This will also be established in the resolution of this resolution to be presented into the board. So the 3-year grazing experience, their plan, their deposit amount, and this is what it be indicated in the envelope number 1 that must be submitted in that, and then envelope number 2, there will be the proposed price and their bid amount. And we explain where the review of the selection will take place and the time. And we also inform them they have the opportunity to have oral bids of at least 5% above the highest written bids. And let's see if we can scroll down. So here, if they have any questions, they are provided my contact information. And we have, again, general disclaimers that we provide. And I think, is that next page? I believe that's. So here again, we provide them the bid form that would have the information about the property, and they can provide their name and their bid amount, and for them to submit in the second sealed envelope. Any questions on this? I think.
I don't see any questions from the public, Ally.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. We can go back to the presentation. So I think this is the end of our presentations. If there's any, like to do any discussions or questions.
Okay, Leslie and Brian, are there any questions from either the board or the public at this point?
I think one of our board members, Mr. President.
Okay. Who is that?
Was that you, Joe? I
Yes.
heard you.
Yeah, Joe?
How many, do we have a certain amount of leases that are outstanding right now that we may see in the next few months?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we are hoping to bring a lease to the board by the end of this year for public bid. We actually had a couple leases that we were looking at going out with first, and we were able to fortunately get bid exemptions from DGS, which is really great because that saves a lot of time and money, and we can directly negotiate with tenants for that. But so now we are looking at what next lease we can bring to the board for this first public bidding.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Leslie.
Yes, Mr. President.
I'm thinking since these bids have to be opened in public that probably at those particular meetings, I probably ought to do that at the JOC, wouldn't you think?
We can certainly arrange to have an area where we could have a few people together. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think that would be more appropriate than having the bidding out of my home. That doesn't make
Yes.
sense to me.
Yes.
But
No, absolutely. We still have access to the building, Mr. President.
yeah, okay.
President Edgar, this is Jeet. This is actually something that was discussed with the team that presented to you today, how we would make that happen, and that was what was suggested. We would set you up in the JOC and do it on camera so everyone can see you unsealing the bid.
Okay, thanks, Jeet. That would make more sense to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've given thought to that.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? That Casey and Allie and Andrea, that was an excellent presentation. At this point, do we have any questions from the board or the public?
I don't have anything else pending from the board, Mr. President.
Okay.
See nothing from the public.
Okay. Members, I think with our thanks to the staff for an excellent presentation, Casey, Allie, and Andrea, thank you. We'll proceed to item 5, which is any other public comments, general public comments. Anything out there, Ryan or Leslie?
I don't have anything, Mr. President.
I don't see anything either.
Okay. Members, we're on item 6, which is adjournment, and without objection, this workshop on the update of the SSJD property management leases and competitive bid process is adjourned. Thank you, members.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
Bill.
a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody have a good
Talk
weekend.
to you later, Leslie.
Bye. Yeah, few minutes.